Top 5 things to avoid in your divorce. Top 5 things to look out for, especially for men, particularly for men, when it comes to divorce. So this list, number 1 on the list is letting your wife file first. You want to avoid this. If you know that a divorce is coming, your wife is telling you she's divorcing you, or you certainly have talked about it enough, or you're 100% resolved that you need to get divorced, you know this is happening, you would definitely file first. It's bad advice to tell you there's some reason to let your wife file first or your spouse file first. It's just not true. It's never the case. There's never a valid reason to say, yeah, let them file first. That's not something that's going to ever be a way to, that's not going to hold water. So filing first involves controlling the narrative. You control what the documents say. You control what's in there, what's not in there. If you don't want a bunch of bad things being said about you that's now public record, you could file first and avoid all that being in a divorce complaint in the first place. Control the words that are in there. You control what's said about your spouse in that document. You can say as little or as much as you want in this divorce complaint. So you just keep it generic. Stick to the facts. Stick to the basics that are required by law. You'll be much happier, you're much better off. So, controlling this, you're controlling the narrative, you're controlling what the documents say, you're controlling what court orders are going to get signed. You file for divorce, at the beginning, it's possible to get a court order signed without a hearing, without even notice to the other person. So you're filing for divorce, they don't even know there's a divorce filed yet, and you've already got a court order signed, which in Michigan and most states it's valid to do that. You can do what are called ex parte orders. Get a court order signed without a hearing that you're both then required to follow. The other person has never even had any say in it. The judge has never heard their side of the story. They've signed a court order. Court orders that could affect custody, parenting time. You can set up a schedule of when you're allowed to see your kids and when you're not allowed to see your kids. It can affect child support. It can affect, how much you're paying for child support without even any verification of your income. Somebody just saying that this is what you make. And now you got a child support order that you're stuck with. So that stuff is never good. It never feels good to have a court order that got signed when you had no say in it and didn't participate just because the other person filed first. These court orders, you can get a restraining order on property. You could get something that says you're not allowed to change bank accounts or take money out or change beneficiaries or do any of those sorts of things. You can have a court order that is indicating who lives in the house and who has to move out. So you want to avoid all this stuff by simply getting a divorce case filed right away. If that's something that's going to be happening, even if you don't want the divorce, it's not going to do you any good to let the other person file and start the lawsuit and set things up that you're going to be stuck with and control the narrative. You want to avoid it. So that's number 1 on the list is mistake that you want to avoid is letting your spouse file first. You want to be the first one to file if that's in your control. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes you don't know the other person is going to file. You think there's problems, but you didn't know it was going to lead to that, or maybe they've filed sort of impulsively and it's happened. So be it. Once it's already happened, that's fine. But if there's any way for you to control things, you'd want to be filing first. And then number 2 on this list of top 5 things to avoid, number 2 is moving out for no reason. You want to avoid this common mistake. You're having some disagreements, you're not really getting along, and you decide to move out. But then you have kids, and it's a problem. We see this all too often. You have children together, you're living together, and you decide, I don't want to live here anymore, and then you move out, and now there's an issue of custody and parenting time and child support, and who's paying the bills and who's not, and you move out, and now your wife's telling you can't come back to the house, you're not allowed to come back, or they've changed the locks, or destroyed some of your property, or who knows what goes on. You don't think anything bad's going to happen, but you don't really know, and you don't want to have to trust someone. You want some things, you're going to want some kind of an agreement before you move out. Now, sometimes you have to move out. Maybe there's domestic violence or threats of domestic violence, or she's threatening, I'm going to call the police, or I'm going to do whatever. You don't want to be living, you can't stay in a toxic environment, but you want to try to do things the right way. Doing it the right way would be to get a divorce filed first and to not move out until something's filed and until there's some kind of an agreement in place. That's the best way to do it. You can't always do things this way. I mean, I understand sometimes things happen. You move out, but you could always leave for the weekend, leave for the week. You don't have to move out or stay. There's other options in between. Go stay with someone else for a while, stay with relatives, whatever. But this whole hog just loading up and moving out for no real reason creates a lot of problems. Even when there are not kids, it creates a whole other set of bills. you're paying for a place to live and now you can't stay there anymore because you've voluntarily moved out, and then that suddenly became involuntary. Now you're stuck with it. So you want to avoid that kind of nonsense with moving out. So that's number 2 on the list. Number 3 on this list of top 5 things to avoid when it comes to divorce is you want to avoid not getting tax advice. In other words, you want to get tax advice. You want to make sure you understand the implications of taxes on your property settlement, on your agreement that you make, whatever it is you guys are talking about. If you own a business, you own a house, you have retirement accounts, all of these things, you have children, and we're talking about how taxes are going to get filed, who's going to claim the children for tax purposes, who's going to claim the exemptions or child care credits or whatever the IRS decides to call it this year. You want to make sure you know all those things, because those kind of things change every year, and how it works can change, and you want to make sure that you're up to speed on it. Get some tax advice. Your lawyer is not a CPA. They are not licensed to give tax advice. You might need help from a financial planner. You might need help from an accountant. You might need all these things, and these people are available. These resources are available. You want to make sure you know what all this looks like before you have a final agreement that you're stuck with and find out there's something you could have changed. One example on tax issues is retirement accounts. $100,000 in a 401k is not equal to $100,000 in a savings account because of the taxes. There's no way to ever take money out of a retirement account without paying taxes, no matter how old you are. You're always paying, so it's always pre-tax money. So if I'm comparing pre-tax money to after-tax money, I got to take that into account. If I'm going to keep my 401k worth $100,000 and my wife's going to keep $100,000 in a savings, that's not equal. My $100,000 in the 401k is really only worth $75,000 by the time you look at the tax difference. So you want to be aware of that. You want to be aware of taxes that are owed, of how you're going to file your taxes. Are you filing jointly? Are you filing separately? You want to be aware of all those issues as you're making an agreement, as your divorce case proceeds, so that you're not caught by surprise later with something you didn't understand about houses, retirement accounts, savings, investments, owning a business, tax returns, claiming children. You want to make sure you understand all these things for yourself. Your lawyer can't possibly guide you on all that stuff. There's just way too much to it. So that's number 3. Number 4 on this top 5 things to avoid with divorces list. Number 4, assuming you can change things later. This is a big one. We see people make this mistake all too often, and then there's nothing we can do about it later. Don't get talked into doing some kind of an agreement with the idea that, oh, well, you do this for now, you can always change it later. Come back next year and modify your parenting time. Come back next year and you can change your child support. It's not true. It's not the case. When it comes to issues related to children, at least in Michigan, where we practice in Metro Detroit area, under Michigan law, child-related issues are modifiable. They're always modifiable. But it's not that simple. You really should assume that whatever you're agreeing to, you're going to be stuck with permanently or for a long time. If it's property settlement, like what to do with retirement accounts, dividing up houses, retirement accounts, cars, any of that kind of stuff is permanent. And the words matter. The agreement you make matters, and then you're stuck with it. When it comes to children and custody and legal custody and physical custody and child support and parenting time, those things are technically modifiable, but it can't just be for any reason. It can't just be because you feel differently now, or you moved, or you got remarried, those are not valid reasons to just go changing something like a custody or parenting time arrangement. So if you're going to agree to a parenting time arrangement that you really don't want, and your lawyer's telling you, well, we'll do this for now, you can change it later, it has to be in writing. You have to put in your agreement that we're going to review this matter in a year, and we're going to take another look at it, because the agreement is we're going to do this for now, we'll change it later. You have to do that. Without that in there, you're not going to be able to change it later. So you want to avoid this assumption of whatever it is you're agreeing to, that somehow you're going to change it in the future, because it's not going to be the case. And number 5 on this top 5 things to avoid with divorce, avoid this one, number 5, refusing to follow advice. We see this a lot too. You want to take the advice of the people that are helping with your divorce case, your divorce lawyer. If you have a therapist or a counselor, you want to take those people's advice. Or if you've gotten advice from an accountant, you want to listen to the advice, and you also want to follow it. These people are not here to fool you or to trick you or to try to make you do something you shouldn't. They're trying to tell you the right thing to do after years of experience with this and knowledge of it. If it's your lawyer, they're working off of experience, knowledge of the law, what they've seen happen, hundreds of other clients they've helped, and they're trying to tell you the best that they can about what they know about it and what they think you should do and why they think you should do it. And you want to follow that advice. too many times we'll see clients that are just going against the advice that they've spent a lot of time and money to get, and you really want to avoid doing that. So that's number 5, is avoid this idea of refusing to follow the advice of lawyers, therapists, professionals with your divorce case. So I hope that helps. That's a top 5 tips on divorce.